Jeff made me use that as my fun fact. Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about bridging the publishing knowledge gap between our authors and editors and the publishing staff. And so just to start a little bit about my background, I've been at the AAP for almost 5 years now. I work on both digital publications and some of our clinical book titles, doing developmental editing roles on both of that. Prior to that, I worked for 12 years as an acquisitions and developmental editor in consumer publishing, working on a variety of different books intended for the general public, a lot of parenting books, business, fiction, various things. So as I go through here, there'll be some case studies. These are highly fictionalized things that come from true stories from both of those worlds that either happened with me or my colleagues. So when I talk about when I say the publishing knowledge gap, what I'm talking about here is the fact that our authors and editors are experts in their field. That's why they're qualified to write for these publications, but publishing isn't their day job. And publishing processes can be complex. They can be very specific and honestly very mysterious. We all in publishing kind of live in our own world, and we all understand what we mean when we're talking about certain things and why our certain processes are done certain ways, but for an outsider, either what these things are or what the meaning for why they're done the way they are can be difficult for them to grasp. And so just talk a little bit about where some of these gaps take place and how to put some things into effect that can kind of help smooth them over. So as we go through to here, I'm going to go through 6 different topics. First would be copy edits. Second is image copyrights and permissions, plagiarism, deadlines, sharing of personal health information, and then marketing aspects. So, copy edits. Here's our first case here. Professor Bluth is publishing an article in the Journal of Real Estate Ethics. The journal's house style indicates that numbers 0 through 9 should be spelled out and higher numbers should be typeset with numerals. Professor Bluth, however, wants all of the numbers to be in Roman numerals because Roman numerals are cool. Tensions between him and the copy editors rise. All right, so when it comes to copy edits, there's a number of issues that we're dealing with here. The first is the fact, that there is a house style that, pretty much every publisher has a house style for the way that they do things, whether that's based on AMA, CMS, AP style, whatever you choose. There's usually sort of those foundational basis and then your own variations of that. And I think we're all aware of the various reasons why that can be useful for us as publishers. It can be sometimes difficult for the authors and editors to hear, well, this is, I need to change this thing that I like because this is just the way you do it. But I think of the reasons for how, various good reasons for house style, one of the most important one is consistency, providing for the reader the ability to, whether they're within, say, one article in a journal or one chapter in a book, that they're going to have consistency throughout. The other issue that will come up a lot is that the author, editor arguing that they want to do things in a certain way because this involves their personal voice. I have a friend of mine right now who's freelance editing for an author who's writing a medical book about how to do a certain procedure, and he's using exclamation marks every third sentence and insists that that's his personal voice, and so they're having fun battles on that. But in terms of solutions, one of the ones I think that's most common is to provide a style guide up front. I feel, and you'll sort of see this as a consistent theme throughout this presentation, that I think the more information you can provide up front, the better. They may not read it, they may not look at it, but at least when the issues come up, you have something to point them to, saying, remember that thing that I sent you 3 months ago? It's there. I'm not just making this up out of the blue to be difficult. I often find a lot of times with copy edits, it's best to offer an explanation for why a change was made, but not include within that a request for approval. You know, I think sometimes in trying to be congenial, we'll say, by the way, we changed this to this, is that okay with you? Just simply offering the question can open Pandora's box a little bit that way. I'm gonna have them say, no, it's not okay with me, where just putting blunt. And that doesn't mean that they might not come back with a question, but I feel like they're a lot less likely to if you don't open that door for them. And then finally, pick your battles. I always, you know, there are times where the purpose is important and there's times where it's less so. And I think that some of the guidelines that are most useful is, you know, does the issue affect the understanding of the text? Will capitulating on this issue lead for less reading? And another thing too is, will it affect future other texts? So perhaps it's not that big of a deal for this particular piece of writing or work, but if you're going to be doing multiple things with this author, and it will be important the second or third time down the line, you know, to keep that in mind, or if allowing that change here is going to somehow affect something else within the publication that you're doing. So in this case, it was decided that since the Roman numerals would affect readability and understanding, the house style was applied, and the editor didn't get their request there. However, he was given permission to post a Roman numerals version of the article on his own personal blog, which made him happy. All right, so next up we have image copyrights and permission. Dean Pelton is publishing an article in Dean's Monthly. To illustrate learning environments, he submits a photo of a study group at his community college. When asked for photo permissions and releases, he says, "It's okay, I took that photo and those are my friends." So with this, you know, one of the biggest issues here is who holds the copyright on the image. A lot of times, authors and editors will think that it's the subject of the photo, where that's not the case. It's the person who took the photo, and in fact, it might not always be the person who took the photo if they took the photograph within, say, perhaps a hospital organizational setting where part of their employment agreement indicates that anything they do as part of their job is the copyright's owned by the institution. So you have to track that down a lot. But while the person who is the subject of the image may not be the copyright holder, they still, in most cases, need to give their permission for this photo of them to be published. There are exceptions to that, of course, but so a lot of times you're actually trying to track down two different permissions there. Another issue you get it off a lot with this is, I got it off the web, when you ask where it came from. There's a lot of, I thought there might be another one there. There's a lot of sort of misunderstandings about how that all works, and you know, you just do a Google image search and all those things are free to use. We know, of course, that that's not true. But as also with the plagiarism issue, there can be some sort of misunderstandings that if it's created by a government or a nonprofit or something like that, that you can use it as well. And it may be true that you not have to pay for it, but a lot of times permission requests will still apply. So again, here, if you can provide them some sort of guidelines up front as they're beginning the project, so that that they're at least aware and thinking about it as they go along. And then when all that stuff comes in, when they're delivering the manuscript, review it all right away. It's a lot easier to change things, replace images, decide not to use them before you get to layout than it is at the beginning. And a lot of times I find it's just, you know, it's going to be a lot more effective to then handle that permissions process for them, simply because so many issues about not knowing how to do it. It can sometimes be a lot easier and effective to say, just tell me where you got it from, and we'll kind of help you, we'll have our staff help track down the proper permission for it. So ask them, you know, where did you get it from, or where's the URL of where you got it off the web. And so in this case, the dean reviewed his school policy and determined that it didn't have any copyright claim rule, so it was okay. So then since he took it, he was the owner on it. And then after an unusually complicated debate, which culminated in a paintball battle, the study group agreed to sign photo releases for publication. All right, right, plagiarism, always a fun one. Mr. Scott submits a manuscript for his Principles of Employee Management textbook. It's rejected for being 25,000 words short. He resubmits 3 days later at full length. Upon reviewing the new text, at the end of the paragraph, the editor sees the hyperlinked phrase, return to top. So when it comes to plagiarism, I find that willful plagiarism is very rare. Most of the time, this is really coming out of a lack of understanding. There's a lot of myths out there in the world, and not even just in publishing. I found it interesting over the last couple of years to see some plagiarism issues arise where people say, who cares, or nobody actually thinks of something first. Well, they do. And so there'll be so a number of misunderstandings that are out there. You know, again, if the government produced it, I can just use it. That there are some elements of truth to that, but you can't just grab an entire, you know, text of writing and just use it. If I take it and rephrase it a little bit, that makes it okay. That does not make it okay. Yeah, so that's the myth there. If I could just tweak it or rearrange it a little bit, it's all better. As we know, you know, as long as there's still that structural, you're not putting it into your own words. Another thing that comes up often is that the author-editor has assigned out, sort of subcontracted their assignment out to an assistant or junior writer who might not be as aware of those issues as well. So solutions, again, priority guidelines up front, run it through checkers, authenticate and turn it in are some of the more common ones. There might be ones that are more specific for particular fields or that you prefer. They can at least, it's not going to do your full job for you, but it can at least indicate red flags that you can then check out. And then when these issues do come up, it's really important to have a delicate hand on how you request these visions. You know, reputations, and in some cases possibly careers are on the line. And as I said before, this is usually unintentional or not willful. And so to find it and then send an email saying, plagiarism has been detected in your manuscript, please, you know, like, that's going to scare people, and it's going to cause people a lot of concern and perhaps ruffles feathers that don't necessarily need to be ruffled. Now, if you're running into a situation where after you come with a gentle approach that says, by the way, you know, we noticed these things, it looks like there may have been a misunderstanding about the proper way to approach this, here's how you need to revise the manuscript to do it. If you're getting resistant at that point, then obviously you need to become more firm in the approach. So in this case, after asking about it, it turned he had asked his assistant Dwight to finish the manuscript for him because he was out of time, and Dwight didn't know the rules, and so that's how he got it. And what ended up happening was that, trusting neither of those two to do it correctly by the deadline, the publisher asked its own editor to write a 25,000 word appendix and then have him approve that. And believe it or not, that's actually a true story. I had to write the 25,000 words. Okay, deadlines. Journal of Psychological Influence is excited to land an op-ed from high-profile figure Don Draper of the SDP-LMNOP agency. 1 month before press, the editor sends him important editorial queries only to get an auto-reply email saying, off to California, should be to California, returning question mark, may reply if able. All right, so with deadlines here, there's a lot of lack of misunderstanding. There's lack of misunderstanding of how much review time is going to be needed for the tech and peer review process, and lack of understanding about how much production time is needed on the end, and then how much time it's going to take to print certain things if you're talking about a print publication or even just the process of getting it up online for the online process. So this is really talking about when people say, well, I finished writing the thing, can we get it out next month for the conference? You know, they just don't really understand all the processes that are involved there. Another big issue is scheduling conflicts. You know, we all work with people, editors and authors who are very busy people and are, you know, often doing these things on a volunteer basis, and they may have scheduling conflicts that come up that just don't allow them to prioritize what you need them to do at that moment. And then in publishing, there's a lot of hurry up and wait. You know, there's, okay, I need this from you now from the editor, and then it's 2 months before they see something again. And that can get frustrating to them because they're saying, well, why did I have to pull out all the stops to get this to you, and then you're not even returning it to me for 2 months. And so, so that could be why a lot of that comes up. So obviously you need to schedule up front, but all along the way be reevaluating and reminding them. You know, we all deal with this on a daily basis, and so you're constantly needing to tweak schedules, but the more you can remind them of what sort of dates for them are coming up, the more likely you're going to hear about conflicts. Check in during the lull times. You may not really have anything that they need to do for 2 months, but within those 2 months, their mother-in-law may have gotten sick, they may have, you know, won a free vacation, and it doesn't hurt to every once in a while just think like, hey, how's it going? Just a reminder that this is coming in a month, and open up that door for that opportunity to let them know about something they didn't think to tell you about. And then, as we always do, squeeze on our own end when needed. All right, so here the editor drove to California searching for him, to no luck. And this is actually a helpful solution too. Went through and prepped everything that they could possibly do. So it didn't sit and just halt it and wait. They just kept going and prepped everything that they could possibly do. In some cases, even trying to anticipate how the editor was going to answer some of those queries and getting those ready if he did. And then 6 hours before the deadline, he shows up and provides brilliant answers to all the queries, and they make it at the last minute. Okay, so this one's a little specific to the field that I work in because I'm in medical publishing. If you have other sorts of similar de-identification issues in your area, you can try to apply it to that, or if not, you know, just take a nap for the next 5 minutes. But in this one, Dr. Dre submits an article about the trauma surgery she performed during a recent plane crash and subsequent hostage situation at her Seattle-based hospital. And Page proves its notice that some radiographs still have patient names on them. She says, but I blacked those out in the Word file. If you're not, the issue here is the HIPAA laws restrict you from sharing a patient's health information without their approval. Again, here, issues are largely due to lack of understanding. There can also be issues due to partial PHI, so perhaps they turn over an X-ray or an image or a patient chart where the name's been blocked out, but it still says the day the appointment took place and what hospital it took place at, et cetera. And in theory, somebody, if they had the inclination to do so, could go and use some of that partial PMI to figure out who it is you're talking about. And a lot of times this shows up in images in our field, and it's due to incorrect image editing. So like in this example, they went into Word, they plopped their image into Word, and they put a black box over the information, but then they also sent the image file separately. Well, what you did in Word did absolutely nothing to the image file because you didn't do them in the same place. So again here, provide them the info up front. From a publisher standpoint, you need to do an immediate check and rejection on this right away because depending on how their institution views it or how their state's laws views it, simply the fact of them emailing you could be a HIPAA violation because it left their office, and so without the patient's permission. And so you need to do an immediate check for it. And this is really important, is that the author needs to then correct that on their own. It's often easier and more effective for us to fix a lot of these things for them ourselves, but in this case, since there's legal issues going on, you can't take on the liability to fix that on your own. It's not even appropriate for you to do that. You've got to immediately check for it. If you see it, kick it back and have them fix it and resubmit. And so in this case, the publisher deleted those files from the computer. They sent her a tutorial on photo editing, and she resubmitted properly de-identified files. And then after a third tragedy of a month at her hospital, she reported the incident to her hospital management. All right, last thing here is marketing. Dr. White's excited to be editor-in-chief of the new journal Breaking Issues in Applied Chemistry. To promote its launch, he suggests that he and his associate editor, Jesse, stand in Times Square handing out blue popsicles since the journal cover is blue. He simply asked that the publisher supply 30,000 popsicles. Here, I know my field. You'll get this sort of, when it comes to marketing, you're like, I know my field. This is what the people in my field respond to. I'm going, if we just do this, this is going to become the greatest new thing. You get a lot of my cousin is in marketing, and she says, again here, publishing is a very unique world. It doesn't operate the way that, marketing and fidget spinners does. Certain things need to be done in certain ways. When I was in consumer publishing, I always said that business book authors were the most difficult to deal with because they knew how to market in their particular business that they worked in, so they thought they knew how you should market the book and would challenge you on it a lot. So I think some of the best solutions for this is to come back and impress them with the level of detail on what you're doing. Don't just say, don't worry, we're going to promote the book or the article or the journal, et cetera. Really go through and kind of overwhelm them with the details on what you are doing. Keep them informed post-launch of what's going on. Don't let it sort of be a drop-off point where you don't hear from them. Keep sending them periodic notices about, hey, we're at this conference again, where we sent out these catalogs, et cetera. And then, actually really listen to their ideas, don't just sort of dismiss it out of hand. Sometimes they do have good ideas for something that either you might not do it exactly the way they're suggesting it, but could help make it more successful. So in this case, the publisher declined the event and spent a bunch of money to promote the journal at chemistry conferences, where they handed out some popsicles too. And it became the #3 chemistry journal, although the editors still insist it would be #1 with more aggressive promotions. So that's it.
Because we have a shorter amount of time for Q&A after this, why don't you save your scenarios? I do think this session could have been a whole 3-hour session too. So if you have some case studies that you want to share, let's do it at the end of this session. I think some of the things that I heard there reminded me of things that Lindsay and Bill said in the earlier session too. And I liked how Lindsay put it, that we are professional publishers. Often we are working with stars in their fields, but we're the professional publishers and we should be proud of what we do. And I think a lot of those cases, it's the professional publishers that do educate these otherwise experts in their particular fields. Okay.